Hey everyone, we have reached our final week discussing Jane Eyre, and I'm really excited to talk about it with you all today. So I have picked out a bunch of passages as you've seen me do this whole time, so let's dive into it and discuss them. The first one is, God did not give me my life to throw away, and to do as you wish me would, I begin to think, be almost equivalent to committing suicide. So here Jane is really just talking about the fact that what is her life's purpose? What should she be doing? And I found this really interesting because previously St. John was trying to tell her that she wasn't a true follower of Christ if she didn't do exactly what he said, which is not how it works, at least not in my beliefs. So the fact that here she's saying no, I'm gonna go do what I need to do for myself, and that is what's actually right. So I really love to see her stand up for her beliefs here. And so that's the first one that we wanted to talk about this week. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well. Okay, so this next passage is when Jane decides she's going to go find Mr. Rochester. So she actually takes a train. She takes a train to his house and she's going to go track him down. And then once she gets off the train, she's like, okay, well, I've made it here. I need to go find him. But in her mind, she's like, is he even going to be there? He could be anywhere in the world right now. He has the means to be wherever he wants. So she's telling herself, oh, I need to just go check it out, see if he's home. So then she thinks, the suggestion was sensible, and yet I could not force myself to act on it. I so dreaded a reply that would crush me with despair. To prolong doubt was to prolong hope. Okay, so this made me think of the Schrodinger's cat thing, if you don't open the box, is the cat alive or dead? That whole concept, she's putting it off so that she doesn't have to have that answer. So that was really my main takeaway here, and it just again shows how deeply she loves Mr. Rochester. She would rather hope that he might be just a train ride away than have confirmation that he's fled altogether. So those were my thoughts on that passage, but I really want to hear yours as well. All right, so Jane ends up going to the manor, and there's this really long passage that's really beautiful. I was going to read it, but I'm not going to, so I just suggest you check it out if you haven't. It's this whole comparison to how she feels approaching it, but it ends by saying, I looked with timorous joy towards the stately house. I saw a blackened ruin. So she is approaching the manor, and instead of seeing this gorgeous, stately place that she's used to, she actually sees that it's ash. It's burnt down. How traumatic would that be? She hasn't been anywhere near here in ages, and now that's what she finds. So that's where we're at right now. What would be going through your mind as Jane, and what was going through your mind as the reader? Okay, so just to kind of catch up to where this next passage is from, Jane freaks out when she sees the ruined estate, as we all would in her position. And then she ends up going to have a meal in town so she can get some more information. So when she's there, she hears this whole story about how, Mr. Rochester fell in love with his illegitimate daughter's tutor and all this stuff. So this is the second time in the book that someone is telling her the story of herself without being confident that that's who they're talking to. So that's kind of interesting. But she's hearing this whole story, and then at the culmination of the story, we find out that his unstable wife ended up lighting the house on fire. She tried to actually kill Jane in her bed. Jane was no longer there. Jane had already fled. And the house went up in smoke. So we hear this whole story, and we find out where Mr. Rochester actually is right now. So Jane ends up going there, and he can't even believe it at first. And then they're having a lot of like really sweet romantic conversations throughout several pages. I have a lot of bookmarks on those. But then she ends up saying, "All my heart is yours, sir. It belongs to you, and with you it would remain. Were fate to exile the rest of me from your presence forever." So this is like a very true thing that we've seen throughout the book. Throughout the book, we've seen that she just wants to be with him. She loves him, even if the timing wasn't right at certain points, and even if, you know, things needed to work themselves out. So this is her first time like really expressing that to Mr. Rochester, and it was a really sweet moment. So let me know what your thoughts are there as well. Okay, so this next passage is really sweet too, and I wanted to include them both. So Jane is talking to Mr. Rochester, and she says, "Mr. Rochester, if ever I did a good deed in my life, if ever I thought a good thought, if ever I prayed a sincere and blameless prayer, if ever I wished a righteous wish, I am rewarded now. To be your wife is, to me, to be as happy as I can be on earth." How sweet is that? So this is really just her having to convince him a bit more. What I didn't mention before is that in that accident, he ended up going back in to make sure everyone got out of the house safely. And in doing so, he became somewhat disabled. And so he's kind of having a little bit of a pity party for himself, especially since Jane was nowhere around. And so he's just feeling like, why would she want to be with him? Because again, he's putting her up on this really high pedestal, but she has him kind of up on one as well. So he's kind of wondering, why would she want to be with me? And she's saying like, this is all I've ever wanted. You are what I want. So just really sweet. I loved it. Let me know your thoughts too. Okay, so something kind of interesting. There's been a few sort of supernatural elements in this book, and I didn't know at first when they happened early on in the book if that was going to be more of a theme throughout the book than it really ended up being. But we have some more. So there's this whole moment that Jane is talking to St. John, and he's like being really aggressive, trying to have her marry him, and she's not feeling it. And then she hears Mr. Rochester's voice, she thinks, saying, "Jane, Jane, Jane." So she like runs around, "Where are you? I'm coming, I'm coming, I'm coming," and then doesn't find him. And so that's what prompted her to initially head to him. And then now she's been with Mr. Rochester, and he's like, "Oh, it's the strangest thing. I had like called out to you, Jane, Jane, Jane." And then I heard a response back. And she had responded saying like, I'm coming for you, da 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 da. So like he had heard that, and they were like nowhere near each other. So this is obviously like a supernatural kind of thing, or just like, I don't know, paranormal, something unusual happened to kind of bring them together once again. So that was really interesting to me, because when it happened originally, where she was hearing the Jane, 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 like I was almost thinking it was like a level of her consciousness being like, I can't be with St. John, I need to be with Mr. Rochester. But then Mr. Rochester was aware of it as well. So super interesting element brought in. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially anyone that, you know, studied this with a professor or a teacher that might have like shed some additional light there. So let me know your thoughts. Okay, so one of the things that has been really fun and interesting in this book is how often Jane breaks that third wall and actually speaks to the reader. And to me, when I think of that concept, like I always think of Deadpool. But like the fact that this is a classic and is happening means that Deadpool didn't invent it, and that's kind of weird. I'm just kidding, but it's really cool to see it in classic literature, and I've been really enjoying that. So the final chapter of this book has a great opening sentence, and I just loved it. Very simple, just a few words. "Reader, I married him." So this whole book, like all the ups and downs, and we didn't know where it was going to lead. I really didn't think it was going to lead back here, to be honest with you, but it did, and she has married him. And I just liked how like simple but beautiful that sentence was, so I wanted to include it as well. Okay, one final really sweet quote, and then that will be it for our read along. But it is, I know what it is to live entirely for and with what I love best on earth. I just found that to be really sweet, really well written. Come on, you guys know that I'm like a complete Charlotte Bronte fangirl by the end of this book, and I had never read anything by her before, so I'm completely converted. I just was so happy that Jane got her happy ending. She's lived a really hard life. This is not to say that I think a girl's happy ending needs to be dependent on marrying a man or anyone or anything of the sort. But like, she had so many ups and downs, like being orphaned young, being treated like crap, and then ended up like getting the inheritance, and then felt like she wanted to split it to be a good person, and then like met someone, fell in love, the wedding didn't, like so many things happened to this poor girl. And I just was really happy that she got what she wanted. And I think that's all we all should get in life, is what we personally want, not what other people are wanting for us. So that is Jane Eyre. If you see all of my post-it notes, so I marked it up a lot, and because they're all on this side, I'll be able to keep them that way when I put them back up on the shelf. And that is it for Jane Eyre. My next read along is actually going to be classic horror tales, and I can grab the book to show you really quick. Okay, so this is going to be my next one, and instead of doing it in the format I've been doing, I'm doing it more as a buddy read, and I'm going to be sharing out more of my thoughts on my Instagram stories. So it's going to be a different format, and we'll see what we all like better. But we'll be reading this September 1st through October 31st. So feel free to join along. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. And it has been so much fun reading with you guys Jane Eyre. I'll do another more traditional classic starting November 1st. So if you have any thoughts on what you'd like to read with me, let me know. Okay, happy reading.